Hey everybody, we just finished our annual Grow Leader Conference, and one of my favorite things to do is walk around and meet so many of you that are looking to expand your ministry or your church or looking for ways to invest the resources you have wisely. And I want to tell you about Wesleyan Investment Foundation. WIF has been helping churches and nonprofits for a long time to invest in future projects and also invest their current resources so they can see a return on that and steward those resources well. We want you to find out more about them at wifonline.com. I also want to tell you about Great American Family Networks. If you're looking for programming that you can watch with your kids, with your family, where you're not going to have to jump up and fast forward 20 seconds to get through a scene, you need to go to gacfamily.com to see how you can watch their programming, stream it, watch it on TV, cable, find out more information about them at gacfamily.com. And then finally, we want to welcome Compassion International to the Grow Leader podcast family. For over 70 years, Compassion has been serving the world's most vulnerable kids and generations, all in the name of Jesus. Here's why I love Compassion, why we love Compassion here at Grow, because they believe in the power of the local church, both frontline churches and the places where they serve, but also churches here in the States. The partnership between parachurch and church is working right with the Compassion International team. They believe in the next generation. We believe in the next generation. In fact, that's what we're talking about today on the Grow Leader podcast. Let's get started. Hey, welcome everybody to the Grow Leader podcast, where we grow leaders that grow churches by helping them reach their full potential. My name's Matt. I'm your host today, and with me, as always, is the one and only Pastor Chris Hodges. PC.
Hello, Matt Miner. It's good to be here today.
How you doing?
I'm doing great. Just came off of the most amazing week in the world.
The best week.
Yeah, when we have what we call Growtion at Church of the Highlands, because it's 3 days of Grow, and Grow ends on the day that Motion begins. So, of course, our Grow conference for pastors, we had over 3,500 pastors here, just so eager, so hungry to see their churches grow, for them to reach their leadership potential. And it's really, I say it this way, Matt, I never feel more alive and more what I'm supposed to do on this planet than when I'm at Grow.
I think our whole Church of the Highlands staff feels that way. There's something so cool about being in a room and realizing no matter the size of your church or the context of your church, we're all in this together.
That's
we're all
exactly
trying to
right.
get better all the time. So it's a fantastic week. If you missed it, I'm guessing we probably have some new listeners today. Welcome. We're so glad that you guys are here. But if you missed being in the room, go check out growleader.com to look at the calendar. A lot of things coming up this year. We're excited about some new things that we're doing. We have conference next year. We'll get those dates up, and you can sign up as soon as it's available. But also regional events. We're taking Grow on the road.
Yeah, this is a new announcement. Of course, we mentioned it at the conference for the first time. Starting in 2023, we'll begin in February and March. We're going to go to some other cities and have a one-day Grow. So if anybody's listening and wasn't able to get into the annual conference, we're going to be going to places like Virginia and Minnesota and Indiana. And really the vision there, Matt, is a lot of people that go to conferences, I think it's about 80% are within driving distance of where it is locally.
Wow.
And praise God for Birmingham, but there's, the South has some of the strongest churches in our country. We want to go to some places where really the churches need to grow, and so that's the idea. So that now we go into some other areas where they can drive to that conference and do some Grow one-day regionals.
It also makes a lot more economic sense as a church. If you want to bring your staff to a conference, sometimes it's hard to travel across the country, but if we're coming to Texas, we're closer to you guys. Get to us. We'd love to see you there. Those dates on the website. Also, just want to let people know other ways they can connect with you. You're passionate about developing leaders, so we have regional events. We have the conference, but also monthly coaching calls.
Yeah, that's something that a lot of people don't know I do, and I've been doing it for throughout 2022, and that is once a month. I get on for a 1-hour call, and I do it about 20 minutes of teaching, and it's really something that I would have told my staff or how I would be training my own staff. In fact, in the last monthly mentoring call, I came into that call right out of our all-staff meeting and literally told all these pastors that I'm mentoring the exact same thing I just told my own staff. And then we leave it up for about 40, 45 minutes for Q&A. And so they can come onto the call and we have discussion, and it just gives me a way to coach and mentor some pastors.
Great way to connect. I'm excited to jump into our topic today. Want to tell you this before we get started. Everything you're hearing us talk about will be in the show notes. So if you're on a treadmill right now or you're in the car, please don't try to take notes and drive. We do not endorse that at all. So it's all in the show notes. I'm a parent, just for context. I have 4 kids. I have a 15-year-old, a 13-year-old, a 10-year-old, and an 8-year-old. Man, it's hard. It's just hard to be a parent, even as a pastor, and to raise our kids. And I think my biggest fear or concern as a parent is I don't want to raise culturally Christian kids. I want to raise godly kids that are just passionate about Jesus and want to make him known. Your kids are out of the house.
Yeah, well, technically, yes. We see them. I think we see them more now out of the house than we did when they actually lived in the house. So, which is a good thing.
That's great. We're at the next stage of parenting.
Right.
Also a grandparent. I can't keep up with how many grandkids you have
8,
now.
and so my oldest child is 33 this year, and my youngest is 25. So yes, technically they are out of the house, but now we're grandparents and. I agree with you. Parenting was probably the hardest thing I ever did in my entire life. Leading and growing a church doesn't even compare to how hard it was to parent our kids. And we certainly don't have a perfect story, but they all do love God. They all do love us, and they all love the church. And that's always been our goal. So it's been not always an easy story, but I have from day one, Matt, wanted, like you, to be a great parent and raise my kids well. And honestly, and when we first started having kids, I studied it a lot, thought I knew everything there was to know about it. I jokingly say that when you're in your 20s, you write books on parenting, and when you're in your 50s, you write books on prayer.
Wow.
Because you realize that you need a whole lot more than just what you think you can learn in a book or at a conference or what someone else told you. It's hard. You need God's help. And we just came out of our Motion conference.
Right.
And we have that conference right before school goes back because we're fighting for a generation. And I think it's something that churches and pastors need to focus on. In fact, that's the topic of our podcast today, because in the beginning of this year, we released a new approach to our children's ministry and our student ministry and our college ministry that honestly, it had great traction in our church, and we want to share it with our listeners today.
It's great. I want to talk about this. We're going to talk about specifically about Generation Z.
Right.
And so just to educate people, Gen Z is anyone born between 1995 and 2015. Crazy stats. I'm going to give a couple of these. Nearly 74 million people in the U.S. are part of Gen Z. 1 in 4 people worldwide are part of Gen Z. Barna says this, that 2 out of 3 Gen Z students are expected to leave the church, to leave the local church.
Yeah, and so we have to pivot. That's the point, is that we've had youth ministry, and this is a great leadership thought for our listeners today, is that what was working doesn't necessarily always will work. And so we have to pivot, and I think this is one of the areas that churches, pastors, parents, and even if you're listening, you don't even have kids, all of us need to pivot to be able to reach a generation, because in many cases, we're doing the exact same things we've always done, but the stats are changing. You just read that 2 out of 3 are leaving the church right now, so we have to pivot.
And a lot of people may not know this. You cut your teeth in ministry. Your formidable years in ministry was as a youth pastor.
Right. The first 11 of now 40 years of ministry, the first 11 was as a youth pastor.
So this has always been very near and dear to your heart.
Yeah, and I was raised in great youth groups and had great youth leaders. And so like most people in ministry, your first assignment is in student ministry. The average youth pastor only lasts about 3 years before they go to something else. I thought, actually, Matt, I was going to be a career youth pastor. I had every desire to be a youth pastor, even in my 50s and 60s. And of course, God had other plans, but I like to think in some ways I still am.
Yeah.
I love investing in our kids, course, now we have Highlands College, which is probably my deepest passion in life, is to raise up young leaders to go into full-time ministry. A lot of what we do at Grow facilitates the vision of Highlands College, and it's something we're very, very passionate about. But I'm very involved in our student ministries. I speak to our college students every year on the campuses of Tuscaloosa and in Auburn. And so, it's something I'm really, really passionate about.
And I would say this, even as a person on your team, you say this, I'm the youth pastor of the church.
Yeah.
Our campus pastors, we carry ourselves like, no, I'm the youth pastor at my campus. Maybe not from an everyday practical standpoint, but the heart that we carry is, it's our job. You've never once just pushed students off to the side and let somebody else run that. You're involved in that all the time. I think it's a massive leadership lesson. It changes the way we do student ministry. But you mentioned a minute ago, you can't just leave things the way they are. That we have to change our, maybe not vision, we're not changing the vision, but the system we use to reach students.
Absolutely.
And you just had, I know this, but you just had kind of the past year you've been through this. And I want to get into how you even got into, hey, I need to look at this again. Tell us that story just about what made you go, maybe I need to relook at how we're doing student ministry.
Well, let me offer a leadership thought, and then I'll tell that story that you're talking about. But I'm always in tune with the fact that things may not be working like they used to. And I create what I call dashboards. So I don't just leave things to the eye, like, oh, everything looks good. No. What is it? And if you don't have some dashboards, if you don't have a gas gauge and a speedometer and some oil pressure, yeah, I think the oil's fine. No. What does the gauge say? So you have to create those in life. And that's not just true of churches, but it's true in every aspect of your life. You have to have some way to check yourself, and that's for another day. But I'm always in tune to this. And so I say that to set up this story because I was getting my hair cut about 9 months ago, and the girl who cuts my hair has kids in our student ministry, and she didn't complain. She didn't say really anything negative. She just made this comment, I wish my kids had the kind of youth group I grew up in. And because I'm in tune, I tune into things like that, I knew she was making a comment, but did not want to be negative, didn't want to say anything that was critical. But she was basically saying what we are offering our kids at Highlands wasn't working. That's what she was saying. And I started asking some questions. And I encourage pastors, you got to do this. You got to talk to the people. You got to ask, how are we doing? Is this working? And so I said, well, Brittany, tell me more. What do you mean by that? She goes, well, I grew up and we used to sit on the floor and play guitars, and that's where I found God. I had a youth pastor, who I could call, and I basically discovered, Matt, through a lot of other conversations with a lot of other parents, that we had a very big youth group, but it wasn't as personal, and it wasn't meeting the needs. And honestly, I think COVID, the 2 years of lockdown and isolation, I think it changed the game as well.
Yeah.
And I think we met needs and it worked in one generation. And I think there's a different set of needs now. And so we went on a process of investigation, assessing, asking questions. In fact, we even did a survey in our church, and I shared it in a message. And I'd love for all of our listeners to go listen to this message I did on February 20th. Go on our website. You can watch this message.
We'll link it in the show notes. So it'll be there. We'll get it to you.
Thank you for that. And we did a survey, and all we did, Matt, was ask this question of our students. I wish my parents knew, you fill in the blank. And we were shocked. And I read these to our congregation, and you could feel the gravity of the moment in the room. I mean, you could feel people knowing, I didn't know they were thinking that. Things like, even though my actions don't always show it, I desperately want to please my parents. I wish my parents knew that how much I love them, even though I don't always say it. I wish my parents knew how much I treasure their advice, even when I acted like I couldn't care less. Listen to this one. I wish my dad knew how much I love holding his hand, even when I would act like it embarrassed me in front of my friends.
Wow.
I wish my parents knew, listen to this one, when they wouldn't let me date that guy and I got mad, I was really thankful they were fighting for me. And you could feel this the gravity again of a generation in my mind that is asking us, fight for me, help me. In fact, one of them was, I wish my parents knew that instead of threatening to punish me, I needed them to do it. One of them said, I wish my parents knew how hard it is to stay pure. One said, I wish my parents knew the evils that I face every day. And it woke me up, Matt. That's all I can tell you. I realized that maybe by the eye, it looks like, wow, yeah, we have a lot of kids coming on Wednesday night once a month, that there were some greater needs out there. And so we got to work. You know this. I got the pastors together, the campus pastors together. At every location, we started hiring youth pastors and raising up youth leaders, and kind of went a little old school and encouraged them to have weekly meetings. And now we have what we call Motion Weekly. It's at every local campus level. And you have kids in it. You could tell the story of how it's impacted your own kids.
Yeah, we were doing just the one monthly gathering, but now since we've been doing our weekly midweek motion nights, which is every Wednesday night, and literally every Wednesday night there's something going on for my kids. So first Wednesday is when we do it's our family service. That's everybody is in together. We do communion, have an extended time of worship and prayer. That's really our believer service for us as a church. The second Wednesday night of the month is Motion Night, and that's a bigger event. That's a large-scale event that is designed to bring your friends to. So
to be evangelistic.
Right. You bring your lost friends to this service. It's going to be fun. It's going to feel like that big concert-y youth environment where there's also a gospel presentation.
Right.
But Motion Midweek, there may be 70 kids at my campus, and 2 of those are mine. And I can tell you they'll tell me the truth. Pastors, you know this. Your kids will tell you the truth about what's happening with church stuff. It's their favorite thing of the week. They are so ready to go and be there, and they have an incredible youth pastor who does an incredible job, and our youth pastors are involved in my kids' lives, and it makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, and when I was thinking back when I was a youth pastor, I had students at my house every night.
Yeah.
They broke more things and ate every bit of food I had, and I loved it. We played Monopoly to midnight, and that's when they opened up and talked about their life and their temptations and what they were dealing with. Many of them are in full-time ministry now because I personally mentored them. We had a meeting on Tuesday night when I was a youth pastor because we had our youth service on Wednesday night. I've always had a prayer service the day before I preached or had any kind of service. So I had Tuesday night, we called it Prayer Warriors, and literally had over 100 kids in my house, praying the paint off the wall and just seeking God. And I just think we're in a season in our culture and in our churches where we need to come back to some more of that organic, grassroots level youth ministry. And of course, I taught it some at Grow this past week. It is my message to churches. It's my message to pastors. It's my message to parents. This is the thing that I really want to emphasize, which is why I wanted us to talk about it on this particular podcast. And I'd like to give our listeners today the 3 things that I think are so critical for all of us to do.
And this doesn't matter if you're a pastor or a dad or a grandparent. This is all of us.
You don't even have to have kids.
Right. This is all of us.
This is an all play. And this is, in the words of Nehemiah, I'll read the verse. Nehemiah was trying to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, and he made this statement in Nehemiah chapter 4. He says, don't be afraid. And honestly, I am a little bit. I think about what my grandkids are going to be raised in, the culture, how it's shifting. But God says, don't be afraid. And if there's a parent listening right now you're so concerned, maybe even privately concerned, secretly crying at night because of what your kids are going through, the Bible says, don't be afraid. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome, and fight for your families, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes. The question is, how? And I'd like to close today's podcast by offering a challenge to everybody that's listening today to, number 1, we've got to pray for this generation. We've got to fight for them in prayer. And I'm not going to leave it right there, Matt. When I first started raising children, I came across a guy I consider to be one of the greatest youth pastors I've ever met in my entire life. And he had amazing kids and an amazing family. And I said, tell me how you pray for your kids. Don't tell me to pray. Tell me how you pray.
What do you say?
Specifically, what are you praying for? And he gave me 3 things. He said, Chris, I pray for 3 things every single day. And from that day, God be my witness, Matt, I have prayed these 3 things over my children. Again, our story has not been perfectly perfect or clean, but to God be the glory, and by the grace of God, man, they love the Lord, every one of them. They have solid families. They love us, Tammy and me, and they love the church, which was our goal. But I want to give our listeners these 3 things, how to pray, and that is pray for them to fear and reverence God. So every day I pray for my kids, God, give my kids the fear of the Lord, a healthy fear of the Lord. And it comes from Psalm 34. It says, come, my children, listen to me, and I will teach you the fear of the Lord. You say, Chris, why do you do that? Because the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. You make your decisions. You make better decisions when you know there's a God that you'll stand before one day. And we talk so much about being in relationship with this God, and he's your friend, and that is all true. But he's also holy. Mm-hmm. He's an all-consuming fire. And when people have the healthy dose of that, there's an unhealthy level of that, in my opinion, where now you're afraid of God, and so you don't want relationship with him. He's not that. But to have a fear of the Lord is so healthy. Second, pray for them to be surrounded with divine favor. Comes from Psalm 5. Surely, Lord, you bless the righteous and you surround people with favor like a shield. So specifically, I said, Lord, today, when my kids go to class, give them favor with their teacher. Give them favor as they were getting jobs. Give them favor with their employers. Give them favor. Give them opportunities, God, that just seem so supernatural. Honestly, Matt, God has put that on my life. I have so much that I did not earn. You can only explain it by the favor of God. And it's a real thing that you can pray. And finally, pray, and this is so important, pray for God to bring them godly friends and godly influences. Out of Psalm 27, verse 17, as iron sharpens iron, so a friend sharpens a friend. So this is true, good or bad. So I'd pray, Lord, I don't want them just to have great friends. I want them to have other influences. God, bring them the right coaches and youth pastors and even, kind of those in that uncle role and aunt role that may not be related, but they just pour in my kids. And my kids to this day have that.
We were talking before we started taping today, and you said that, a question you like to ask is, hey, give me a list of the people that impacted your life the most.
Yeah, so I love table topics. And one of the topics that I ask at a table, because I find it so fascinating, is tell me, talk about the person that has influenced you the most. And probably close to 9 out of 10 mention a grandparent, by the way. And the other 10% or more mention a coach, a youth pastor. And the point is, it's rarely the parents. And that should not hurt the parents' feelings.
It's deflating and encouraging all at the same time if it's the right people.
Exactly. And they do love their parents, but it takes more than parents, right, is the message. It takes a village. You've heard that phrase. But it takes all of us pouring into our kids. I have a friend, a pastor friend. Well, I'll even say who it is. It's Pastor Dino Rizzo. Pastor Dino calls my kids regularly. Hey, just praying for you and just love you and anything I can do for you. He just calls them and checks on them. And then he'll text me, hey, just talk to David. He's doing good. And I'll call David and say, hey, I heard you talk to Pastor Dino. And David will say, man, Dad, Pastor Dino said this, this, and this. And I'm thinking, I say that all the time. And he just heard it differently from him.
Yeah, you need other voices.
Exactly.
Sure.
And so we've got to be more intentional and even pray for the right people in our kids' lives.
So pray for our kids. That doesn't mean you have to pray with them. Make sure you're praying for them first.
Exactly.
What else?
The second thing I taught in this message that you can go hear on February 20th is that we have to get our kids back in church. And so parents, you have to prioritize church. And you have to prioritize youth group meetings, and we have to get them in children's church. And it's on us to create something that actually helps your kids, right? And so we started at Highlands, for instance, with our children's ministry with graded curriculum. And I taught them, I said, I don't know if you know this or not, but we have graded curriculum. It's just like school. So if you give us K through 6th grade in the children's church, they'll know the whole Bible. But if you miss, they won't. Because we're going to do it in a graded fashion. So this year they're going to learn this part of the Bible, and this year they're going to learn this part, and it's intentional and weekly, and our parents didn't know that. So like when you're missing, they're missing. They're missing out on stuff that they need to know. And so we're way more intentional, and pastors, this should encourage you. We saw attendance go way up when our parents knew that we were that intentional in our children's church.
We've even also kind of gamified kids' church. So my kids, they were going to go to their grandparents to my wife's parents' house. And Nora, my 8-year-old, she said, no, Dad, I can't miss church. I'm like, why not? She said, I'm about to hit my 14-week streak. I get a bag of Skittles. I'm like, hey, Mommy, she can't miss church. She's been working for this bag of Skittles, and they love it.
Yeah.
We've gamified just, hey, there's incentive to be there in the room all the time. The kids love it.
And I grew up, we did Sunday school lessons in the Baptist church. And so every church was doing the same lessons. So when we went on vacation, we had to find it. We found a Baptist church so we could get that exact same lesson. And they were in lockstep with the church that from home. So we were getting the curriculum even when we traveled, and it'd be great for our churches to get back to some of that again, where we're that intentional with getting the Word of God in our kids.
And I think we've talked about this. Dads, you have so much influence in this area to lean in and lead in a loving, guiding, inviting way to prioritize
and say
church.
no to some of the trivial things. Oh, we're going to go to the beach today. Oh, we're going to go play sports this morning. I'll just say it. My dad, you could play sports and we'd go places, but not on Sunday morning. We were given that time to God, and I thank God for it. Here's the last one, because I know we're running out of time, but I want to encourage everybody to not only pray and not only to prioritize, but to participate in the development of a young person. Every person that's listening to me should be mentoring and helping someone. There are people that are listening to me right now that need to be Pastor Dino Rizzo. You need to find some friends. Get your friend's kid's phone number and help your friend by texting his or her kids and encouraging them. And I always say my favorite people love my favorite people. Mm-hmm. And it's true. The people that have helped me raise, encourage, strengthen, give opportunities to my kids are my favorite people. And so I encourage, be an example, be available, be positive, encourage, teach, start a small group, but we've got to get involved in this. And I tell you, if we'll do these three things, if we'll pray, if we'll prioritize church, and if we'll all participate in the development of this generation, I think we're gonna win them.
It's a great reminder that the way you love an adult the best is by loving the people they love. That is their kids.
Absolutely.
We have to remind our teams of that all the time. This has been awesome. So great. Don't forget, every bit of this is going to be available in the show notes. We'll link the message in there as well. This is a brand new start to a new season for us.
Yeah, I'm excited. And next month,
brand new studio. At Highlands College.
Can't wait.
It's going to look different. We can't wait to see you guys next month on the Grow Leader Podcast.